I stand in my childhood bedroom on Christmas morning, surrounded by packed boxes, watching my father's face drain of color as he reads something on his phone. My mother clutches my brother Tyler's arm while he whispers desperately about damage control. The Georgetown University acceptance letter sits prominently on my desk next to a printed email confirmation. 24 hours ago, my parents threatened to cut off my education unless I apologized to Tyler for exposing his academic cheating. I had simply smiled and said, "All right." Now my family realizes they severely underestimated their supposedly obedient daughter. My name is Christine, and until 3 days ago, I believed my brother Tyler walked on water. At 25, he had graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Medical School and was completing his residency at Massachusetts General Hospital. Meanwhile, I was just another junior at our local state university, struggling through my biochemistry degree while my parents constantly reminded me how I could never measure up to their golden boy. The dynamics in our household had been carved in stone since childhood. Tyler received the praise, the financial support, and the unwavering belief that he could do no wrong. I received the leftover attention and constant comparisons that left me feeling inadequate. When Tyler won the state science fair in high school, our parents threw him a celebration dinner. When I placed second in the same competition 2 years later, they mentioned it briefly over takeout pizza. But everything changed 3 nights before Christmas when I was working late in the university library finishing my undergraduate thesis on protein synthesis mechanisms. I had been researching for months, developing groundbreaking insights into cellular regeneration that even my professors found impressive. As I scrolled through recent medical publications to ensure my work was original, I stumbled across something that made my stomach drop. They're published in the Journal of Medical Research under Tyler's name was an entire section of my thesis. Word for word, not similar concepts or parallel thinking, but my exact sentences, my precise methodology, my original conclusions about enzyme interactions. The publication date was 6 months ago, which meant Tyler had somehow accessed my work before I had even submitted it to my advisor. My hands trembling, I dug deeper. The more I searched, the more horrified I became. Tyler's supposedly groundbreaking research paper that had landed him a competitive fellowship contained 3 full pages of my undergraduate work. The protein synthesis pathways I had spent countless nights mapping were now attributed to my brother, earning him professional acclaim while I struggled in obscurity. I printed everything, my mind racing as I realized the implications. If Tyler was stealing my current work, what else had he taken credit for? Over the years, I remembered his sudden academic improvement in high school, his mysterious ability to produce brilliant science projects despite spending most of his time playing video games. The next morning, I confronted Tyler privately in his childhood bedroom, now converted into a shrine to his achievements. Medical journals, framed diplomas, and awards covered every surface. I laid the evidence on his desk, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "We need to talk about your Journal of Medical Research publication," I said, pointing to the highlighted sections. "This is my work, Tyler. My thesis, my research, my words." Tyler glanced at the papers, then at me and laughed. Actually laughed. "Christine, you're being ridiculous. Research builds on previous work all the time. Besides, nobody's going to believe you came up with this first. I'm the one with the Harvard degree in the medical career." I have timestamps on all my files. I continued pulling out my laptop. Email drafts, document histories, everything proving I wrote this months before your publication date. You somehow accessed my university account and stole my work. His laugh faded, replaced by something colder. "Look, little sister, you're clearly jealous of my success." "It's sad, really. Maybe you should focus on your own mediocre achievements instead of trying to sabotage mine. And if you're thinking of making accusations, remember that I'm about to become a doctor while you're still struggling through undergraduate classes. Who do you think people will believe?" The casual cruelty in his voice hit me like a physical blow. This was my brother, the person I had looked up to my entire life, dismissing not only my work, but my worth as a human being. He leaned back in his chair, confident in his superiority. "Besides," he added, If you cause problems for me, I'll just tell mom and dad that you're having some kind of breakdown. They already think you're unstable compared to me. One word from me about your mental state and they'll have you in therapy faster than you can say plagiarism. I stood there absorbing his words, feeling pieces of my worldview crumbling. The brother I had admired was not only a fraud, but willing to destroy me to protect his lies. The parents who had raised me were so blinded by favoritism that they would believe his word over evidence. That evening, during our traditional Christmas Eve dinner with aunts, uncles, and grandparents, I made my decision. Tyler was regaling everyone with stories of his medical residency, basking in their admiration and praise. My parents beamed with pride, occasionally glancing at me with expressions that clearly communicated their disappointment in having such an unremarkable daughter. Tyler's research is being considered for publication in another prestigious journal, my mother announced to the table. The hospital administration says his work on protein synthesis could revolutionize treatment protocols. Protein synthesis, my work, my discoveries, my future. I cleared my throat and stood up. Actually, I'd like to share something about Tyler's research. I had prepared copies of all the evidence, organizing it professionally, with highlighted comparisons and timestamps. Tyler's groundbreaking work on protein synthesis is remarkable because it's identical to my undergraduate thesis, which I wrote 6 months before his publication. The table fell silent. I distributed the evidence packages, watching as my family members examined the side-by-side comparisons. The similarities were undeniable down to specific technical terminology that only I had developed. Tyler's face shifted through surprise, anger, and calculation before settling on wounded innocence. "I can't believe this," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "My own sister is so jealous of my success that she's fabricating evidence to try to destroy my career. This is exactly what I was worried about. Christine has been struggling academically and socially, and I think the stress is affecting her mental health." He turned to our parents, tears forming in his eyes. "I've been trying to help her, encouraging her to seek counseling, but instead, she's created this elaborate fiction where I somehow stole her work. It's heartbreaking to see my little sister this delusional." My mother immediately moved to comfort Tyler, while my father's expression hardened as he looked at me. The evidence sat on the table, clear and undeniable, but they were already choosing to believe Tyler's performance over documented facts. Christine Marie Johnson. My father said, using my full name in the tone that had terrified me as a child. "I am disgusted by this behavior. Your brother has worked incredibly hard to build his career, and instead of supporting him, you're trying to tear him down with lies and fabrications." "Dad, look at the evidence. The timestamps, the document histories, the—" "Say enough!" he snapped. "Tyler is a Harvard graduate completing his medical residency. You're a struggling undergraduate student who clearly can't handle her brother's success. This jealousy and these false accusations end now." My mother nodded her arm around Tyler's shoulders. "Sweetie, we love you, but this behavior is unacceptable. Tyler has earned everything he's achieved through hard work and brilliance. These conspiracy theories need to stop." The extended family shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to examine the evidence or follow my parents' lead. My grandfather picked up one of the evidence packets, his engineering background making him naturally inclined toward documentation. But my father quickly intervened. "We're not entertaining these delusions," Dad announced. "Christine, you will apologize to Tyler immediately for these false accusations, or we will stop paying your tuition and living expenses. Your education is a privilege we provide, and we won't fund someone who attacks our family with lies." The ultimatum hung in the air like poison gas. Tyler watched me with a mixture of triumph and mock concern, already confident in his victory. My parents stood united in their threat, willing to destroy my educational future to protect their golden child's lies. I looked around the table at my extended family, seeing uncertainty in some faces and disappointment in others. The evidence was right there, clear as daylight, but the family dynamics and Tyler's manipulation had created a reality where truth mattered less than preserving their image of perfection. Well, my mother demanded. "We're waiting for your apology." I felt something shift inside me, a crystal clear moment of understanding. These people would never see Tyler's flaws or acknowledge my worth. I could apologize, submit to their manipulation, and spend the rest of my life in Tyler's shadow, or I could choose a different path. I smiled, genuinely smiled for the first time in months. All right, I said simply. Then I walked upstairs to my room, leaving them to interpret those two words however they wanted. Behind me, I heard Tyler beginning another performance about forgiveness and family healing, confident that he had won. My parents were probably already planning how to spin this story to make themselves look like patient, loving guardians dealing with a troubled child. But as I closed my bedroom door and pulled out my laptop, I was planning something entirely different. What my family didn't know as they celebrated Tyler's victory downstairs was that I had been investigating my brother's academic fraud for 6 months. The protein synthesis theft wasn't my first discovery. It was simply the final piece of evidence I needed to complete my case. My suspicions began during Thanksgiving when Tyler mentioned casually that his high school science fair project had been referenced in a medical journal. I remembered that project mainly because I had helped him with the initial research when I was just a freshman. Later, alone in my dorm room, I searched for the journal reference and found something disturbing. The methodology Tyler had used was remarkably similar to a paper published by a graduate student at Northwestern University, published 2 weeks before our science fair submission deadline. That discovery led me down a rabbit hole of investigation that consumed my winter break and countless library hours. I systematically examined every major academic achievement Tyler had claimed since high school, cross-referencing his work with published research student databases and online academic repositories. What I found was a pattern of theft that spanned 7 years. Tyler hadn't just stolen my work, he was a serial academic plagiarist who had built his entire reputation on other people's research. In high school, he had copied projects from obscure student publications. In college, he had submitted modified versions of international research papers counting on his professors' unfamiliarity with foreign publications. In medical school, he had taken collaboration projects and claimed sole credit by systematically excluding his partners from final submissions. Most disturbing was how he accessed the work he stole. Through careful examination of login records I obtained through a friend in the university IT department, I discovered that Tyler had been hacking into academic accounts for years. He had accessed my university system using password information he had gathered during family visits, downloading my drafts and research notes months before I submitted them officially. But Tyler's fraud extended beyond simple plagiarism. I found evidence that he had stolen work from his medical school classmates, taking credit for group research projects and publishing papers that included uncredited contributions from other residents. One particularly damaging discovery was a case where Tyler had stolen preliminary research from a fellow resident working on pediatric heart surgery protocols, then published the work under his own name while his colleague was on medical leave. The scope of Tyler's academic dishonesty was staggering, but what made it truly dangerous was how he had incorporated stolen research into actual medical treatment protocols. His fellowship at Massachusetts General was based on research that included falsified data and plagiarized methodologies that were being used to treat real patients. During Christmas Eve night, while my family slept off their dinner in celebration of Tyler's supposed moral victory, I worked methodically in my room. I organized 7 years of evidence into professional reports, categorizing each instance of fraud with supporting documentation, timestamps, and source materials. I had screenshots of the original papers, Tyler's submissions, login records, showing his unauthorized access to various accounts and correspondence, proving he had excluded collaborators from credit. I prepared separate evidence packages for Harvard Medical School's Academic Integrity Board, Massachusetts General Hospitals Administration, the Massachusetts Medical Board, and the editors of 3 medical journals that had published Tyler's fraudulent research. Each package was customized to the specific institution's concerns, highlighting how Tyler's fraud affected their community and reputation. But my most important preparation had nothing to do with exposing Tyler's crimes. 6 months ago, when I first discovered the pattern of his fraud, I had realized that confronting him would likely result in my family choosing his side over mine. I began planning for independence. I had secretly applied for transfer to Georgetown University's biochemistry program using my original research and legitimate academic achievements to secure not only admission, but a full academic scholarship. The application process required submitting my work to independent verification, ensuring that Georgetown's decision was based on my authentic abilities rather than any potential contamination from Tyler's fraud. To support myself financially, I had taken a part-time research position with a pharmaceutical company contributing to legitimate drug development while earning enough money to cover living expenses. I had been saving every dollar preparing for the moment when my family's support would be withdrawn. I had also secured an apartment near Georgetown's campus, signing a lease that would begin January 1st. Everything was arranged for my complete separation from my family's financial control and emotional manipulation. As I worked through the night, I felt a mixture of sadness and liberation. Sadness for the family relationships I was about to lose, but liberation from years of living in Tyler's fraudulent shadow. I was about to expose not just academic dishonesty, but a pattern of manipulation and abuse that had shaped my entire life. At 3 a.m., I finished preparing all the institutional reports and scheduled them to be automatically sent at 8 a.m. Christmas morning. I wanted my family to understand the consequences of their choices before the institutions began responding. This wasn't revenge, it was justice and self-preservation. I also composed personal emails to my extended family, including the evidence of Tyler's fraud and explaining why I felt compelled to report it. I wanted them to understand that this wasn't jealous sibling rivalry, but a serious case of academic fraud that affected real patients and legitimate researchers. As dawn approached, I packed my belongings systematically, taking only items I had purchased myself or received as gifts from people other than my parents. I left behind anything that represented my family's financial support, wanting to make a clean break from their control. The Georgetown acceptance letter sat prominently on my desk next to printed confirmations of my scholarship, my new job, and my apartment lease. I wanted my parents to see that their threats to withdraw support were meaningless because I had already arranged for my independence. By sunrise, everything was ready. In 3 hours, emails would automatically send to institutions across the country exposing Tyler's fraud and beginning investigations that would likely end his medical career. My family would discover that their supposedly obedient daughter had been planning her escape for months and was no longer subject to their manipulation. I showered, dressed in professional attire, and went downstairs to make coffee. In a few hours, my family would wake up to a completely different reality, one where Tyler's golden reputation was revealed as fraud and where I was no longer willing to sacrifice my truth for their comfort. The automatic email system would handle the institutional notifications, but I wanted to be present when my family realized what was happening. I wanted them to see that their threats and ultimatums had not broken me, but had finally freed me from caring about their approval. As I sat in the kitchen drinking coffee and watching the sunrise, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine peace. Whatever happened next, I would no longer be living a lie or enabling Tyler's fraud. The truth was about to be revealed, and I was ready to face the consequences of choosing integrity over family loyalty. Tyler stumbled into the kitchen at 7:30, still wearing his pajamas and sporting the satisfied smile of someone who believed he had successfully manipulated his entire family. He barely glanced at me as he reached for the coffee pot, probably assuming I had spent the night wallowing in defeat and preparing my apology. "Morning, sis," he said with mock cheerfulness. "I hope you slept well and thought about what we discussed yesterday. Mom and Dad are really looking forward to hearing your apology this morning. Maybe we can put all this unpleasantness behind us and have a nice Christmas after all." I watched him pour coffee into his favorite mug, a Harvard Medical School commemorative piece that our parents had given him for graduation. He moved with the casual confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions, someone who believed his charm and manipulation would always protect him. "I did think about what we discussed," I replied, calmly checking my phone. 7:55. 3 minutes until the automatic emails began sending. "I thought about it all night, actually." Tyler nodded approvingly, assuming my sleepless night meant I had been agonizing over his ultimatum. good. I know this was hard for you, but family comes first. We need to stick together, especially when outside forces try to create problems between us. Outside forces, he was already rewriting history, transforming his academic fraud into some external threat to family unity. The level of self-deception was breathtaking, but I no longer found it surprising. At exactly 8 a.m., my phone buzzed with the first confirmation that my scheduled emails had been sent. Then Tyler's phone buzzed. Then again, and again. His expression shifted from casual confidence to concern as multiple notifications flooded his device. He glanced at the screen and I watched his face transform as he read the sender information, Harvard Medical School Academic Integrity Office. What the hell? He muttered, opening the first email. His coffee mug slipped from his hand, shattering against the kitchen floor as he read. The Harvard logo was clearly visible at the top of the email as his hands began to shake. "Oh God," he whispered, scrolling through the message. "Oh God, oh God, oh God." More notifications continued arriving. Massachusetts General Hospital Administration, Massachusetts Medical Board, Journal of Medical Research Editorial Board. Each institution was receiving comprehensive evidence packages documenting 7 years of Tyler's academic fraud. I remained seated at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee and watching my brother's world crumble in real time. He looked up at me with growing horror, finally understanding what my calm, "all right," had actually meant. "Christine, what did you do?" he demanded, his voice rising to a near scream. "What did you send them?" Before I could answer, our parents rushed into the kitchen, drawn by the sound of Tyler's distress and the crash of his broken coffee mug. Mom immediately went to Tyler, stepping carefully around the ceramic shards while Dad looked around suspiciously. "What's going on?" Mom asked, wrapping her arms around Tyler as he stared at his phone in shock. She did it," Tyler said, pointing at me with a trembling finger. "She actually did it. She sent everything to Harvard, to the hospital, to everyone. They're calling for an emergency investigation. They want me to report to Boston immediately." Dad's face darkened as he turned toward me. "Christine, what is he talking about?" I gestured toward the Georgetown acceptance letter on the counter, along with my scholarship documentation and apartment lease. I sent documentation of Tyler's academic fraud to the appropriate institutions: Harvard, his hospital, the Medical Licensing Board, and the journals that published his stolen research. "You can't just retract this," Tyler said desperately, scrolling through more emails. "You have to call them back and tell them it was a mistake, that you made everything up. This is going to destroy everything I've worked for." "Everything you stole," I corrected gently. "Your career was built on other people's work, Tyler. The only thing being destroyed is the lie you've been living." Mom looked back and forth between us, struggling to process what was happening. "Sweetheart, surely this is just a misunderstanding. Tyler wouldn't steal anyone's work. He's brilliant. He's always been brilliant." "Mom, look at the evidence," I said, pointing to copies of the documentation I had left on the counter. Timestamps, login records, side-by-side comparisons of original work, and Tyler's submissions. 7 years of systematic academic fraud. Dad picked up the papers, his business background making him naturally inclined toward documentation. As he examined the evidence, his expression gradually shifted from anger to confusion to something approaching horror. "Tyler," he said slowly, "these dates show that Christine's research was completed months before your publication, and these login records suggest you accessed her university account without authorization." "It's all fabricated," Tyler shouted, but his voice lacked conviction. "She's computer savvy. She could have faked all of this to make me look bad." More notifications kept arriving on Tyler's phone. By now, every institution was acknowledging receipt of my evidence packages and announcing preliminary investigations. The Massachusetts Medical Board was requesting an immediate meeting to discuss potential license suspension pending their review. "Christine," Mom pleaded, "surely you can fix this. Call them back and explain that it was all a misunderstanding, that you were upset and not thinking clearly." I looked at my mother, this woman who had spent my entire life dismissing my achievements and praising Tyler's fraudulent ones. Even now, faced with overwhelming evidence, she was asking me to perpetuate the lie that had defined our family dynamics. I can't fix this, Mom, because it's not broken, I said. Tyler stole research from me from his classmates from published papers. He's been committing academic fraud for 7 years, and some of that fraudulent research has been used in medical protocols that affect real patients. Tyler's phone rang the caller ID showing Massachusetts General Hospital. He stared at it for a long moment before answering with a shaky voice. Dr. Tyler Johnson speaking. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I watched Tyler's face grow paler with each word. He answered, "Yes, sir," and "I understand," several times before hanging up. "I'm suspended," he said numbly. "Effective immediately. They want me in Boston by tomorrow morning for an emergency review. They're launching a full investigation into all my research and patient care protocols." The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of Tyler's phone continuing to buzz with new messages. Each notification represented another institution, another investigation, another piece of his fraudulent empire crumbling. Dad was still examining the evidence, his analytical mind processing the implications. "Tyler, if even half of this documentation is accurate, you could face criminal charges for fraud. The medical board could revoke your license permanently." "Please, tell me you didn't send it," Tyler whispered, looking at me with desperate eyes. "Please, tell me you can still stop this." I met his gaze steadily. "Send what?" His face crumpled as he realized that everything had already been sent, that all the institutions were already investigating, that his career as he knew it was over. The golden boy who had manipulated our family for decades was finally facing consequences for his actions. Dad's phone started ringing. Mom's phone started ringing. The extended family was beginning to respond to the evidence packages I had sent them, wanting explanations and expressing shock at Tyler's fraud. Our perfect family Christmas morning had become the day Tyler's house of lies finally collapsed. The kitchen descended into chaos as our parents tried to manage multiple phone calls while Tyler sat at the table staring at his device as more damaging notifications continued arriving. I remained calm, having prepared for exactly this scenario during my months of planning. Mom answered her phone, and I could hear Aunt Sarah's voice clearly from across the room, asking questions about the evidence packages she had received. Dad was on hold with Harvard, trying to speak with someone in administration who could explain what was happening to his son's career. Tyler looked up from his phone with wild eyes. "Christine, you don't understand what you've done. This isn't just about me anymore. The hospital is reviewing all the patients who received treatment based on my research protocols. If they find problems, people could sue us. Our family could lose everything." "Maybe you should have considered that before you stole research and used it to treat patients," I replied calmly. "You vindictive little witch," he snarled, dropping his usual pretense of being the wounded victim. "You've destroyed everything because you couldn't handle being the failure in the family. This is all because you're jealous that I'm successful and you're nothing." Before I could respond, Tyler's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Dr. Patricia Fernandez, his residency director at Massachusetts General. Tyler's hands shook as he answered. "Dr. Fernandez, I can explain everything," he said desperately. "Tyler, put this on speakerphone," Dad demanded. "If this affects our family, we need to hear what they're saying." Tyler reluctantly switched to speaker mode, and Dr. Fernandez's crisp, professional voice filled the kitchen. "Dr. Johnson, I'm calling to inform you that your residency has been suspended immediately pending a full investigation into academic fraud allegations. We've received comprehensive documentation suggesting systematic plagiarism and research theft spanning multiple years." "Dr. Fernandez, this is all a misunderstanding," Tyler interrupted. "My sister is having emotional problems and she's created false evidence to make me look bad. None of this is real." "Dr. Johnson, I've reviewed the preliminary evidence, including login records showing unauthorized access to university databases and side-by-side comparisons of your work with original sources. This is not a family dispute. This is a serious case of academic and professional misconduct." Dad leaned closer to the phone. "This is Tyler's father, Dr. Fernandez. Surely there's been some mistake. Tyler graduated summa cum laude from Harvard. He's always been an exceptional student." Sir, that may be true, but the evidence suggests that Dr. Johnson's exceptional performance was built on stolen work. We've also discovered that research protocols he developed for patient treatment included methodologies that were plagiarized from other sources. This has potential patient safety implications that we must investigate immediately. Mom gasped. Patient safety? What does that mean? It means that if Dr. Johnson used fraudulent research to develop treatment protocols, and if those protocols were applied to actual patients, we need to review every case to ensure no harm was done. The hospital's legal team is already assembling to address potential malpractice claims. Tyler buried his face in his hands. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. So, Dr. Johnson, you need to report to Boston tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for a formal review. Bring legal representation if you wish. The Massachusetts Medical Board has also opened a parallel investigation that could result in the permanent revocation of your medical license. The call ended, leaving our kitchen in stunned silence. Mom was crying, Dad was pacing, and Tyler sat motionless, finally understanding the full scope of what was unfolding. My phone buzzed with a text message from my cousin Jennifer. Holy crap, Christine. I had no idea Tyler was stealing work. Grandpa is furious. He says he's proud of you for speaking up. Another text, this one from my Uncle Mark. Read the evidence you sent. As a fellow researcher, I wanted you to know you did the right thing. Academic integrity matters more than family politics. The extended family was responding to my evidence packages with shock and surprisingly support. They had all witnessed years of Tyler's golden boy treatment and were now understanding why I had felt compelled to expose the truth. Dad ended his call with Harvard and turned to face us, his business instincts finally overriding his parental bias. I just spoke with the Harvard Academic Integrity Office. They're treating this as the most serious case of systematic fraud they've encountered in decades. They're considering revoking Tyler's degree entirely. They can't do that, Mom protested. He earned that degree. No, Mom, he stole it, I said firmly. Just like he stole my research, just like he stole from his classmates, just like he's been stealing from everyone for 7 years. Tyler looked up from his hands, his eyes red, but filled with rage rather than remorse. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won something here? You've destroyed our entire family over your petty jealousy. I exposed academic fraud that was affecting patient care. I corrected. If that destroys our family, it's because our family was built on lies. Our family was fine until you decided to play detective and ruin everyone's life, Tyler shot back. You're going to be responsible when Mom and Dad lose their house because of the legal bills. You're going to be responsible when I can't find work anywhere because you destroyed my reputation. Dad's phone rang again. This time it was our family lawyer calling because someone from Harvard had contacted him about potential legal proceedings. As Dad answered, I could see him beginning to understand that this wasn't going away and wasn't something he could control or minimize. Tyler stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm going to Boston right now. I'm going to fix this before it gets any worse. How are you going to fix 7 years of documented fraud? I asked. I'll tell them the truth, that you've been mentally unstable for months, that you fabricated all this evidence because you can't handle my success. I'll prove that you're lying. I opened my laptop and showed him the screen displaying cloud storage folders containing hundreds of documents, timestamps, and source materials. Tyler, I have backup copies of everything stored in multiple locations. The evidence has already been verified by independent sources. You can't lie your way out of documentation. His face twisted with fury. Then I'll make sure you pay for this. If my career is over, I'll spend the rest of my life making yours miserable too. The mask was finally off. Gone was the charming, successful doctor, replaced by someone willing to threaten his own sister to protect his fraudulent reputation. For the first time, I think my parents saw a glimpse of who Tyler really was beneath his carefully constructed image. Dad hung up his phone call and looked around the kitchen at his collapsing family. The lawyer says we need to prepare for multiple lawsuits. Harvard wants their scholarship money back. The hospital is reviewing malpractice claims. The medical board could impose financial penalties. Mom sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. How did we get here? How did everything fall apart so quickly? I looked at my mother, this woman who had enabled Tyler's behavior for decades, and felt a mixture of sadness and liberation. It fell apart because it was never real, Mom. Tyler's success was built on theft and lies, and our family's pride was built on celebrating fraud. Tyler grabbed his keys from the counter. I'm driving to Boston. I'm going to fix this. Tyler, you're in no condition to drive, Dad said, but Tyler was already heading for the door. I'll call when I've cleaned up the mess Christine created, he called back. The front door slammed, leaving the three of us in the kitchen surrounded by the evidence of Tyler's fraud and the wreckage of our family's illusions. Outside, I could hear Tyler's car speeding down our street, carrying him toward a confrontation with reality that no amount of charm or manipulation could resolve. Tyler had been gone for an hour when the landline rang its old-fashioned bell, cutting through the tense silence in our kitchen. Dad answered with a weary, Johnson residence, his voice lacking its usual confidence. Mr. Johnson, this is Dr. Margaret Chen from Harvard Medical School's Office of Academic Integrity, came a crisp, authoritative voice. I need to speak with you about your son Tyler's situation. Dad put the call on speakerphone, his hands shaking slightly. Yes, Dr. Chen, we're aware that there's been some kind of investigation opened. Mr. Johnson, I'm calling to inform you that after an emergency review of the evidence submitted this morning, Harvard Medical School has voted to revoke Tyler's medical degree entirely. The scope and duration of his academic fraud makes this the most serious case we've encountered in the institution's history. Mom let out a strangled sob, covering her mouth with both hands. I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness, knowing this was justice, but also understanding it meant Tyler's life as he knew it was over. Additionally, Dr. Chen continued, Harvard is demanding immediate repayment of all scholarship funds provided during Tyler's 4 years of medical education, totaling $253,000 plus administrative costs and damages. We consider this theft of educational services through fraud. Dad's face went ashen. $253,000. We don't have that kind of money available immediately. The university understands that this creates financial hardship, but Tyler obtained his education through fraudulent means. We have legal obligation to recover these funds. Our legal department will be contacting you within 48 hours to discuss repayment arrangements. The call ended, leaving us in stunned silence. $250,000, our family's financial security, their retirement plans, possibly their house, all threatened because Tyler had built his career on stolen work. Before we could process this information fully, Mom's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and paled. It's Tyler, she answered hesitantly. Tyler, how did your meeting go? Tyler's voice came through the speaker, shaky and desperate. Mom, it's bad. It's really, really bad. Harvard isn't just investigating anymore. They've already made their decision. They're taking my degree away. We know, sweetheart. Dr. Chen just called us. You don't understand. Tyler continued, his voice rising. It's not just Harvard. Massachusetts General has fired me completely. Not suspended, fired. They're reviewing every patient case I've been involved with for the past 2 years. And the medical board meeting I thought was next week. They moved it up to tomorrow morning because they consider me a threat to patient safety. Dad leaned closer to the phone. What exactly are they saying, Tyler? They're saying I used fraudulent research to develop treatment protocols that were applied to real patients. They found 3 cases where patients received medications based on my stolen research, and one of those patients had complications that might be related to the incorrect dosing calculations. Mom gasped. Is someone hurt? Did you hurt someone? I don't know. The dosing calculations weren't wrong in my papers, but they were wrong in the original research I copied from because I didn't understand the full context. A 70-year-old woman with heart problems received double the recommended dose of a blood thinner because I modified the dosage recommendations without understanding the underlying mathematics. The kitchen fell silent as we absorbed this information. Tyler hadn't just stolen academic work. He had potentially endangered patients by using research he didn't fully understand to treat real people. Where's the patient now? Dad asked. She's fine. They caught the error and corrected it, but only because another doctor questioned my protocol. If she had continued on the wrong dosage for a few more days, she could have had serious bleeding complications. The hospital's legal team is already preparing for potential malpractice suits. Tyler's academic fraud had crossed the line from career misconduct into potential patient harm. The institutions weren't just protecting academic integrity anymore, they were protecting public safety. My phone buzzed with a text from my Georgetown contact. Christine, we've heard about the Harvard situation. The university administration wants you to know that your scholarship and position are secure. Your work speaks for itself, and we're impressed by your integrity in this difficult situation. Another text from my research supervisor at the pharmaceutical company. Word is getting around about your brother's case. I wanted you to know that your work with us has been exemplary, and this situation only reinforces our confidence in your character. The professional community was responding quickly to Tyler's exposure, but instead of damaging my reputation by association, his fraud was actually highlighting my integrity and independence. Dad's phone rang again. This time it was our insurance agent calling because Massachusetts General's legal department had contacted our homeowner's insurance company about potential malpractice claims against Tyler. Bill, I need to ask you some difficult questions, the agent said after Dad put him on speaker. Your homeowner's policy has a small professional liability component, but it's not designed to cover systematic fraud or malpractice claims. If the hospital pursues damages against your son, your personal assets could be at risk. What kind of damages are we talking about? Dad asked. I don't have specifics yet, but medical malpractice settlements can range from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars depending on the extent of patient harm, and that's separate from Harvard's demand for scholarship repayment. When that call ended, we sat in our kitchen surrounded by evidence of Tyler's fraud while the financial implications crashed over us like a tsunami. The house, their retirement savings, possibly everything my parents had worked for their entire lives was now at risk because they had refused to see their golden child's true nature. Mom looked at me with desperate eyes. Christine, surely you can help fix this. You're smart with computers and research. Can't you contact these institutions and explain that Tyler made mistakes but didn't mean to hurt anyone? I stared at her, amazed that even now, even after everything, she was asking me to enable Tyler's fraud. Mom, Tyler didn't make mistakes. He systematically stole research for 7 years and used it to treat patients. That's not a mistake. That's criminal negligence. But he's your brother, she pleaded. Family should stick together. Tyler stopped being my brother the moment he chose to steal my work and threatened to destroy my life to cover it up, I replied. And you stopped being my advocate the moment you chose to protect his fraud over supporting my truth. Dad was scrolling through his phone, probably calculating numbers and trying to figure out how to survive the financial catastrophe that was unfolding. Christine, whatever Tyler did this is going to destroy our family financially. Your mother and I could lose everything we've worked for. I felt a stab of sympathy for my parents despite their years of favoritism and manipulation. They were victims too, in a sense, victims of Tyler's lies and their own willingness to believe them. I'm sorry about the financial impact, I said honestly. But Tyler created this situation, not me. I just reported academic fraud to the appropriate authorities. It's not my responsibility to protect him from the consequences of his choices. My phone rang. It was my grandfather, my father's father, the retired engineer who had always encouraged my analytical thinking. Christine, honey, I got your email with all that documentation, he said, his voice gentle but firm. I wanted to call and tell you that you did the right thing. What Tyler did was fraud, plain and simple, and it needed to be exposed before more people got hurt. I could see my parents listening, hearing their own father support my decision. Grandpa continued, I've seen this kind of thing in engineering. When someone cuts corners or falsifies data, eventually, people get hurt. You probably saved lives by speaking up. After hanging up, I looked at my parents, these people who had shaped my childhood, but never truly seen me. Grandpa understands what Tyler did. Uncle Mark understands. The extended family understands. You two are the only ones still trying to pretend this is my fault instead of Tyler's choice. The weight of their situation was finally hitting them. Their golden child was revealed as a fraud, their financial security was threatened, and their family relationships were crumbling. Everything they had built their identity around was collapsing. But instead of taking responsibility for enabling Tyler's behavior, they were still looking at me as the problem that needed to be fixed. Tyler returned from Boston at 6 p.m., his professional composure completely shattered. He stumbled through the front door looking like he had aged a decade in a single day, his usually perfect appearance disheveled and his eyes wild with desperation and rage. "They're taking everything," he announced to the living room where we had gathered to discuss our family's financial crisis. "My medical license, my career, my reputation, everything is gone because my little sister couldn't handle being the family failure." I was sitting calmly in the chair by the window, having spent the afternoon fielding supportive calls from extended family and colleagues who understood the gravity of Tyler's fraud. My Georgetown professors had reached out to express support, and even some of Tyler's former medical school classmates had contacted me to thank me for exposing his pattern of theft. "Tyler, sit down," Dad said wearily. "We need to figure out how to handle the financial implications of this situation." "The financial implications?" Tyler laughed bitterly. "We're talking about bankruptcy. Harvard wants their money back immediately. The hospital is preparing malpractice suits. The medical board is considering criminal charges for endangering patients. And it's all because Christine couldn't stand that I was successful while she was mediocre." He turned to face me directly, his expression shifting from despair to cold calculation. "But you know what? If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me. I'm going to make sure everyone knows you're mentally unstable. I'll tell them you've been obsessed with destroying me for years, that you fabricated evidence because you're psychotic and jealous." "Tyler, that's enough!" Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. Even she was beginning to see the ugly reality beneath his polished exterior. "No, it's not enough," Tyler snapped. "She destroyed my life, and now I'm going to destroy hers." He lunged toward my laptop, which was sitting on the coffee table with my Georgetown acceptance letter and scholarship documentation visible on the screen. "I'm going to delete everything, all your research, all your evidence, all your precious Georgetown materials. If I can't have a career, neither can you." I had anticipated this possibility. As Tyler grabbed my laptop, I calmly pulled out my phone and showed him the screen displaying cloud storage confirmations. "Everything is backed up in multiple secure locations, Tyler. The evidence has already been sent to institutions across the country. Deleting my laptop won't change anything." His face twisted with rage as he raised the laptop above his head, preparing to smash it against the floor. Dad and Uncle Mark, who had arrived an hour earlier, grabbed Tyler's arms and forced him to lower the device. "Tyler, stop," Dad commanded. "You're only making this worse." "Hey, worse?" Tyler screamed. "How could this be worse? My career is over. My life is ruined. And she's sitting there acting like she's done something noble instead of destroying our entire family." The front door opened and more extended family members entered. Aunt Sarah, Cousin Jennifer, and my grandparents had driven over after hearing about the day's developments. They looked shocked at Tyler's behavior and concerned about the obvious family crisis. Grandpa, at 82, walked directly to where Tyler was being restrained and looked him in the eye. "Tyler, I've read all the evidence your sister compiled. You committed fraud for 7 years. You stole from other students, from researchers, from your own sister. You endangered patients with your lies, and now you're threatening to destroy Christine's property because she had the courage to tell the truth." "Grandpa, you don't understand," Tyler started, but Grandpa held up his hand. "I understand perfectly. I'm a retired engineer. I know what academic fraud looks like, and I know what happens when people use false information to make decisions that affect other people's safety. What you did was criminal, and Christine was right to report it." Tyler looked around the room at his extended family, seeing disapproval and disappointment instead of the sympathy he expected. Even his aunts and uncles, who had praised his achievements for years, were now understanding that those achievements were built on lies. "This is unbelievable," he muttered. "My own family is turning against me because of her lies." Not lies, Tyler, Aunt Sarah said gently. Documentation, evidence, proof of systematic academic theft. We've all read what Christine sent us, and it's clear that you've been stealing work for years. Tyler's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and his face went pale. It's the police, he said in a whisper. Everyone in the room fell silent as he answered. The conversation was brief, with Tyler mostly responding, "Yes, officer," and "I understand." When he hung up, he looked around at our gathered family with something approaching terror. The Boston police want to interview me tomorrow about potential criminal fraud charges. Harvard filed a formal complaint claiming I stole educational services through fraudulent means. They're treating this as a felony. The room absorbed this news in stunned silence. Criminal charges meant Tyler could face jail time, not just professional consequences. The scope of his fraud had escalated beyond family drama into serious legal territory. "Tyler," Mom said quietly, "maybe you should call a lawyer." "With what money?" he snapped. "I just lost my job. Remember, I can't afford a lawyer for criminal defense while we're trying to pay back Harvard and defend against malpractice suits." Uncle Mark, who had been quiet throughout the confrontation, finally spoke up. "Tyler, I think it's time you took responsibility for what you've done instead of blaming Christine for reporting it." Responsibility. Tyler's voice cracked. "I'm 25 years old. My life is over before it started, all because my sister couldn't handle being the unsuccessful child." Jennifer, my cousin, who was completing her own PhD in chemistry, stood up and faced Tyler directly. "Your life isn't over because Christine reported fraud. Your life is over because you committed fraud for 7 years against patients who trusted you with their health." "Thank you, Jennifer," I said quietly. It meant everything to have support from family members who understood the principles at stake. Tyler looked around the room one final time, seeing only disappointment and disapproval, where he had always found admiration and praise. His carefully constructed image as the golden child had crumbled completely, leaving behind only the reality of his choices and their consequences. "I'm fine," he said, his voice hollow. "Everybody thinks I'm the villain, but remember this moment when our family is destroyed, when Mom and Dad lose their house, when everyone's life is ruined. Remember that Christine chose to destroy all of us rather than protect her family." He walked toward the door, then turned back to face me one last time. "You think you've won something, but you haven't. You've just guaranteed that nobody in this family will ever trust anyone else again. You've destroyed us all for your precious principles." With that, he left, driving away into the December evening while his family sat in our living room trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. Grandpa came over and sat beside me, putting his weathered hand on my shoulder. "Christine, honey, you did the right thing. It was hard and it cost you, but you protected people who could have been hurt by Tyler's fraud. That takes real courage." Looking around the room at my extended family, I saw understanding and support where I had expected rejection. They recognized that I had chosen truth over family loyalty, integrity over comfort, and justice over enabling. But I also saw my parents sitting together on the couch, looking lost and overwhelmed by the collapse of everything they had believed about their children and their family. Tyler's fraud had hurt them too, even if they couldn't see it yet. The golden child they had nurtured and protected for 25 years was gone, revealed as a fraud who had manipulated them as expertly as he had manipulated academic institutions. Their investment in his success had cost them their financial security and possibly their family relationships. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely sorry for my parents, even as I remained convinced that exposing Tyler's fraud was the right choice. 6 months later, I stood in Georgetown University's Advanced Biochemistry Laboratory, pivoting solutions for my research into novel cancer treatment pathways. Through the window, I could see the Washington, D.C. skyline, a view that reminded me daily of how far I had traveled from that devastating Christmas morning. My research was progressing better than anyone had anticipated. The protein synthesis work that Tyler had stolen was now being developed into legitimate therapeutic applications under my name and supervision. 3 pharmaceutical companies had approached Georgetown about licensing my discoveries, and I was being fast-tracked into the university's combined MD-PhD program with full funding. The irony wasn't lost on me. Tyler had stolen my work to build a fraudulent career that eventually collapsed, while my authentic research was now opening doors I had never imagined possible. Truth had a way of rising to the surface even when temporarily buried under lies and manipulation. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Just saw the news article about your cancer research. Mom sent it to the whole family. She's finally bragging about you instead of Tyler." Character development. The family dynamics had shifted dramatically over the past months. Initially, my parents had blamed me for Tyler's downfall and their financial crisis, but as the legal proceedings unfolded and the extent of Tyler's fraud became undeniable, they began to understand what I had tried to tell them. Tyler's criminal trial had been a wake-up call for everyone. The evidence presented in court showed not just academic plagiarism, but a calculated pattern of deception that had endangered patients and defrauded institutions. The prosecutor described Tyler as a manipulative individual who had exploited trust at every level, from family relationships to professional responsibilities. He ultimately pleaded guilty to fraud charges and was sentenced to 2 years of probation community service and restitution payments. His medical license was permanently revoked, and he was banned from working in any healthcare-related field. Harvard had agreed to a reduced repayment plan that would take my parents 15 years to complete, but at least they were able to keep their house. Tyler was now working as an insurance claims adjuster in Pittsburgh, living in a small apartment and attending court-mandated therapy sessions. According to family reports, he was slowly beginning to acknowledge the harm his fraud had caused, though the process of taking responsibility was difficult and ongoing. The transformation that surprised me most was in my parents. After months of family therapy and difficult conversations, they had begun to recognize their role in enabling Tyler's behavior. Mom had actually apologized to me in writing, acknowledging years of favoritism and expressing regret for dismissing my achievements while celebrating Tyler's fraudulent ones. Dad had been even more direct in his accountability. During one of our monthly family dinners, which had resumed in March, he looked me in the eye and said, "Christine, I failed you as a father. I was so impressed by Tyler's apparent success that I ignored his character flaws and your genuine accomplishments. I'm sorry it took a criminal trial for me to see the truth." Those words meant more to me than any praise Tyler had ever received. My parents were finally seeing me as an individual rather than as Tyler's less successful sister. The extended family had rallied around me throughout the crisis. Grandpa attended every major presentation I gave at Georgetown, beaming with pride as I discussed my research findings. Uncle Mark had helped me navigate the professional implications of being associated with Tyler's fraud, introducing me to colleagues who could provide objective assessments of my work. Most importantly, I had learned that standing up for truth, even when it cost relationships, ultimately led to healthier and more authentic connections. The family members who supported my decision to report Tyler's fraud were people I could trust with my real thoughts and feelings. The relationships built on honesty were stronger than those based on protecting lies. My phone rang, interrupting my laboratory work. It was Dr. Patricia Fernandez from Massachusetts, General the doctor who had fired Tyler 6 months earlier. So I say, "Christine, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the Georgetown Research Office. I wanted to personally thank you for your courage in exposing your brother's fraud." I stepped away from my experiments to take the call. "Dr. Fernandez, you don't need to thank me. I just reported academic dishonesty." "You did much more than that. Your evidence helped us identify 3 other residents who were collaborating with Tyler on fraudulent research. We've overhauled our entire academic integrity system because of what you revealed. You probably prevented future patient harm by speaking up when you did." She continued, "I also wanted you to know that your reputation in the medical research community is excellent. When you apply for medical school, I'd be happy to provide a recommendation letter. The field needs more people with your integrity." After hanging up, I reflected on how the crisis had actually enhanced rather than damaged my professional prospects. By choosing truth over family loyalty, I had demonstrated the kind of character that academic and medical institutions valued. Tyler's fraud had been a test of my principles, and passing that test had opened doors throughout the scientific community. My research supervisor, Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, approached my workstation with a smile. "Christine, I just received confirmation that your paper on protein synthesis pathways has been accepted for publication in the Journal of Molecular Biology. This is a significant achievement for an undergraduate researcher." The same journal that had published Tyler's fraudulent work was now publishing my legitimate research. The irony was poetic, but more importantly, it represented validation that my work stood on its own merit. "There's something else," Dr. Rodriguez continued. "The National Science Foundation wants to interview you for a profile they're writing about academic integrity and research ethics. Your case has become a teaching example in graduate programs across the country." I had never intended to become a symbol of academic integrity, but I was proud that my experience might help other students find the courage to report fraud when they encountered it. If Tyler's downfall could prevent future academic dishonesty, then something positive had emerged from our family's crisis. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from Tyler himself. We had been exchanging occasional messages since his therapy had helped him begin taking responsibility for his actions. "I saw the news about your NSF interview. Proud of you for building a real career based on real work. I know I have no right to ask, but thank you for not giving up on the idea that I could eventually become a better person. Therapy is helping me understand how badly I hurt you and everyone else." His messages were still awkward and often self-centered, but they represented genuine progress from the person who had threatened to destroy my life 6 months earlier. I had learned that forgiveness didn't require reconciliation, but it did require releasing anger that could poison my own future. I texted back, "I hope you continue growing and finding ways to contribute positively. Take care of yourself." As I returned to my research, I thought about the life lesson that had emerged from our family's crisis. Enabling toxic behavior ultimately hurts everyone involved, including the person whose bad choices are being protected. By refusing to enable Tyler's fraud, I had given him the opportunity to face reality and potentially become a better person. By insisting on truth, I had given my parents the chance to develop more authentic relationships with both their children. The process had been painful, but it had led to growth for everyone involved. Tyler was learning accountability, my parents were learning to see their children as individuals, and I was learning that I didn't need anyone's approval to pursue truth and justice. Dr. Rodriguez handed me the official acceptance letter for my research publication. As I read my name listed as the primary author on groundbreaking cancer treatment research, I realized that this moment represented everything Tyler's fraudulent achievements never could: authentic accomplishment based on real work, real talent, and real integrity. My phone rang one more time. It was Mom calling from the grocery store. "Christine, honey, I'm at the store and I saw a magazine article about young women in science. Your research was mentioned as one of the most promising developments in cancer treatment. I bought 10 copies to send to everyone we know." For the first time in my adult life, my mother was bragging about my real achievements instead of Tyler's fake ones. The family dynamic had fundamentally shifted, creating space for me to be seen and appreciated for who I actually was. "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot." "Sweetheart, I know I've said this before, but I want to say it again. You were right to report Tyler's fraud, even though it was hard for all of us. You protected patients and upheld principles that matter more than family comfort. I'm proud of you for having the courage I lacked." After we hung up, I stood in my laboratory surrounded by equipment and research that represented my authentic future. Through the window, the sunset painted the Washington sky in shades of gold and purple, beautiful and real. I had learned that sometimes protecting the truth requires sacrificing relationships, but paradoxically, insisting on truth often leads to deeper, more honest connections. My family was smaller now, but more genuine. My career prospects were built on solid ground rather than stolen foundations. My self-respect was intact because I had chosen integrity over approval. The golden child who had dominated our family for decades was gone, but in his place, everyone had the opportunity to become more authentic versions of themselves. Tyler could learn accountability, our parents could develop balanced relationships with both children, and I could pursue my dreams without living in anyone's shadow. Standing in that laboratory holding my first major research publication, I understood that the most important victory wasn't Tyler's downfall, but my own rise. By refusing to enable fraud, I had created space for truth to flourish. By choosing justice over comfort, I had built a foundation for genuine success. The Christmas morning that had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning. The moment I said all right to my parents' ultimatum and chose my own path had set in motion events that transformed not just my life, but my entire family's understanding of truth, accountability, and authentic achievement. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior, even when that refusal costs relationships. Sometimes protecting truth matters more than protecting feelings. Sometimes standing up for what's right, even when you're standing alone, is the only path to real freedom. I returned to my cancer research knowing that every discovery I made would be built on legitimate work, honest effort, and authentic achievement. Tyler had taught me inadvertently that success built on lies is ultimately hollow. Real accomplishment earned through integrity and perseverance was worth more than any fraudulent recognition. My phone buzzed one final time with a message from Georgetown's medical school admissions office. Congratulations, your application has been accepted with full scholarship for the combined MD-PhD program. Your research excellence and demonstrated integrity make you exactly the kind of physician-scientist our profession needs. I smiled, looking around my laboratory one more time before heading home. Tomorrow I would continue building a career based on truth, surrounded by people who valued authenticity over appearance. The future stretched ahead bright with possibilities that were entirely my own. The golden child was gone, but the authentic daughter had finally found her place in the world. Before I share this story with all of you, I want to ask, have you ever faced a situation where standing up for what's right meant risking important relationships? How did you find the courage to choose integrity over comfort? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting others who choose truth over convenience. If this resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories, and share this with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for their principles. Remember, authentic success built on truth always outshines achievements built on lies. Take care of yourselves and never be afraid to speak up for what's right.